to the second edition of the NDC's weekly press briefing. As we indicated last week, this platform has been introduced to ensure that we have regular engagements on happenings in the country, regular engagements on the mismanagement of the affairs of this country by the Akufo-Addo government, which has led to a systematic decline of all sectors of our nation, and also regular engagements to put across our alternatives, superior policy alternatives, I should say, as far as the 2020 general elections is concerned. Today's edition will focus on two issues. First, I will be addressing you on what we've termed Corruption Tracker. We'll be launching a Corruption Tracker series today, and we'll be focusing on the Bosgate corruption scandal. Second, we will be responding to the false claims by no less a person than the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency President Akufo-Addo, about the legacy, the infrastructural legacy of the NDC and John Dramani Mahama. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, corruption has undoubtedly been the bane of Ghana's development for a very long time, with the poor and vulnerable being at the worst end of this canker. As a responsible opposition with a responsibility of keeping government on its toes, the NDC is today embarking on a Corruption Tracker series to track the status of the countless cases of corruption we have witnessed under the Akufo-Addo government in the last 3.5 years. Scandals which have occasioned huge financial losses to the state and robbed Ghanaians of the development they were promised in the year 2016. The NDC is deeply worried about the fact that resources that otherwise should have gone into developmental projects in order to uplift the poor are sadly going to line the pockets of several greedy and selfish officials of the Akufo-Addo government through graft and sleaze. The Corruption Tracker series we are launching today is to help Ghanaians appreciate how the corrupt Akufo-Addo government is plundering the already constrained public purse of Ghana and the extent of damage this government has inflicted on all sectors of our nation. Through this initiative, we shall be taking the pains, one after the other, to do a total recall of the numerous corruption scandals in recent time and how President Akufo-Addo at all times has failed to protect the public purse. While at it, we shall also prove to the Ghanaian people that contrary to the self-acclaimed anti-corruption credentials, President Akufo-Addo is indeed the leader and chief patron of this notoriously corrupt administration. Now to the Bosgate corruption scandal, which is our focus for today. The Bosgate corruption scandal, as you may be aware of, happened in the year 2017, but has been conveniently swept under the carpet by President Akufo-Addo, who thinks that Ghanaians have a short memory. Now, friends from the media, what are the facts? On the 18th of January 2017, 5 million liters of fuel was contaminated at the premises of the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company of Ghana, BOST, by the mixture of diesel and petrol, and sold to unlicensed businesses, Moving Energy, Zoop Oil, under very dubious circumstances. At all times material to that transaction, Moving Energy and Zoop Oil, who benefited from this transaction, had not been licensed by the National Petroleum Authority to trade in petroleum products in the downstream petroleum sector of Ghana. The sale of the contaminated fuel to these unlicensed businesses was therefore unlawful, as it breached Section 11 and 32 of the NPA Act of 2005, Act 691. Again, the transaction did not go through any tender process in breach of Section 16, 40, 35, 83, and 84 of the Public Procurement Act of Ghana. Yet, in spite of these facts, which were known to President Akufo-Addo at the time, he mounted a robust defense for the then managing director of BOX, insisting that allegations of wrongdoing and corruption against him were false. And I'm sure you do recall when he mounted this defense. It was at the presidential media encounter in 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, this was after the BNI and NPA had attempted to cover up the scandal by rewarding the work of the committee that had been set up by the Minister for Energy at the time, Honorable Boakye Jakum. Today, we know that the committee tasked to investigate the Movimpina Zouk oil contaminated fuel saga has found that the transaction was criminal and that the proceeds from same has not been paid into the state coffers till date. Indeed, the committee's report indicates that Movimpina has not paid BOS for the 471,000 liters of fuel sold through Zouk Oil Limited. The committee also found out that thousands of liters of fuel which was lodged in the tanks of NPA could not be accounted for. So this is the seriousness of the corruption scandal we are talking about today. A major asset belonging to the people of this country, 5 million liters of fuel contaminated by the mixture of petrol and diesel, was sold in breach of the Public Procurement Law and the NPA Act to unlicensed businesses which did not even exist at the time of the transaction. The president was aware of these breaches of the law, grievous breaches of the law, I should say. And yet, very characteristic of him, he chose to mount a robust defense for the then MD, Alfred Obeng. The committee which was tasked to investigate this matter has completed their work. They have presented their report. The president is aware of that. And in this report, the committee has found that not only was the transaction unlawful, but that the transaction was illegal, and that till date, the proceeds have not been paid to the state coffers. Yet, President Akufo-Addo and his government are quiet. They do not care about how the people of this country can have access to the proceeds of this transaction to meet our development needs. The media, all of us are quiet, understandably so, because we have been overwhelmed by the number of corruption scandals we have witnessed under this government. But when you have millions of Ghana cedis, money which would have gone into developmental projects, like I've said already, going into the pockets of a few selfish and greedy government officials, that should be a serious issue which should occupy our attention as a nation, and that is why we are raising this issue. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, not only was the transaction unlawful for breach of the Public Procurement Act and the NPA Act, but the proceeds from same have been pocketed by a few corrupt officials and criminal entities with the tacit approval of President Akufo-Addo. We are saying with his tacit approval because he has not made any effort, despite being the president and the appointer of the board of directors of BOS, managing director and all that, he has not made any effort to recover these state resources for the state. President Akufo-Addo's handling of the Bosgate corruption scandal smacks of grand collusion and cover-up of epic proportions. The fact that till date, no one is standing prosecution for this pungent corruption scandal, which has caused a huge financial loss to the state, bears President Akufo-Addo out as the biggest enabler and promoter of corruption in the history of Ghana. Ironically, this is the man who rode on the back of an anti-corruption campaign into office, promising not to tolerate or countenance same under his administration. However, after being elected into office, he has normalized corruption in his government and has made it very attractive. He has defended and cleared his corrupt appointees of several grievous corruption scandals against the state, like the Boss Gate scandal we are talking about this morning. It is for this reason that he has earned the accolade, the chief corruption clearing agent. Like similar other stinking corruption scandals that Ghanaians have witnessed under this regime, the corruption clearing agent, President Akufo-Addo, has been under the delusion that by coming out to give flowery speeches about corruption, he will succeed in exonerating and whitewashing his government from the corruption tag that inextricably hangs on his neck like a medal. But that has failed, as Ghanaians have now seen him for who he really is. Now, because this scandal is about bust, let me tell you something about our record relative to the management of bust, what we did, and how the unprecedented levels of corruption we are witnessing under this government is eroding all the gains we made under the Mahama regime. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is worthy of note that under the leadership of the visionary John Dramani Mahama, bust was so efficiently managed such that for the first time in the history of Ghana, bust was able to trade with international oil giants like British Petroleum, Vitol, Trafigura, just to mention a few, on an open credit supply system, a situation that helped to drive local fuel prices down in the year 2015 and 2016, even when world market prices dictated upward adjustments in fuel prices. The ex-well NDC Mahama government restructured bust operations from zero imports in 2013 to running a minimum of 5 of the 6 fully functional and profitable petroleum terminals across the country. We established a petroleum trading department in the company within 24 months and traded petroleum products of mainly gas, gasoline, gas oil, LPG, crude oil in the West African market to the tune of about $1.5 billion. At the time we were exiting office in 2017, the Mahama administration bequeathed to the Akufo-Addo government 200,000 metric tons of refined products valued at about 1 billion Ghana cedis. Not just that, we also left them 2 million barrels of crude, 1 million from the 10 fields, our own indigenous oil field in Ghana, and 1 million barrels of Kwaibu crude from Nigeria, valued at about $100 million. That is how sound the finances and the state of bust was at the time we were leaving office. So well, distinguished friends from the media, did the NDC Mahama administration improve the finances of bust through prudent management, that after reducing the bust margin from 10 pesos to 3 pesos in the year 2015, we indicated in our 2016 supplementary budget that we were going to totally scrap the 3 pesos bust margin on the prices of petroleum products to reduce the cost of fuel and provide some respite to Ghanaian petroleum consumers. And let me make the point that one of the men who were very instrumental in the transformation of bust is sitting right behind me, our communications director, Mr. Kakra Esemwa, who was the board chair at bust and worked closely with the then MD Wadakun to make this possible. But ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is sad to note today that as a result of the TV and plundering of the resources of bust in the last 3.5 years, the once profitable and buoyant state asset, which was a partner to several reputable multinational oil companies under the ex-World Mahama regime, has been completely run down by the Akufo-Addo government, such that today, bust has no strategic stocks of its own and is actually borrowing to pay its workers. So should there be any emergency in this country, bust cannot fall on any strategic stocks of their own, save a few liters of fuel they have from some BDCs in this country today. That is the tragedy we have on our hands. Even more bizarre and painful is the fact that after running down bust through corruption and thievery, President Akufo-Addo, who preached against the imposition of taxes on petroleum products while in opposition and promised to move this country from taxation to production, has recently increased the boss margin the Mahama administration had promised to scrap by 100%. That is from 3 pesos to 6 pesos, by increasing the price of fuel by about 8%, ostensibly to raise funds for the very company bossed, which he has collapsed through corruption. This latest action by President Akufo-Addo at the time the nation is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic with its attendant economic effects is a monumental betrayal of the trust of Ghanaians and smacks of insensitivity of the highest order. President Akufo-Addo's decision to punish the already burdened Ghanaian with more taxes for his corrupt acts and that of his errant appointees that have brought boss to his knees is most insensitive and unacceptable. And so in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen of the press, there is no gainsaying the fact that President Akufo-Addo's much touted fight against corruption has failed. He has flattered to deceive on his promise to fight corruption and protect the public purse. The endemic levels of corruption in his government has caused the country huge financial losses for which he must be held liable. And this Bossgate corruption scandal is a typical example. It is now clear beyond daylight that the much-touted fight against corruption was a ruse from day one, for which reason President Akufo-Addo should be kicked out of office come 7 December 2020. The NDC is deeply worried that state resources, such as the proceeds of the sale of the 5 million liters of contaminated fuel, which could have gone into the provision of schools, roads, hospitals, and other social amenities to ameliorate the plight of Ghanaians, have been pocketed by a few corrupt officials of the Akufo-Addo government. Little wonder that this government has been likened by many as an organized criminal syndicate of thieves. And before I conclude, anytime you talk about corruption this way, people ask you, so what are your alternatives? What would you have done differently if you were in office? Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that under the next NDC Mahama government, we will do better, we will do definitely. First of all, as a country, we need to ensure that we reduce, if not eliminate, the incidence of contamination of fuel at BOS and other state-owned agencies. Number two, we need to ensure that in disposing or in selling these products, we follow the Public Procurement Act, we go through competitive tendering, we ensure that there is value for money in the interest of the state. And when they are sold, we must ensure that monies are paid into the state coffers. Today you look around, look at all the problems this country is bedeviled with, simply because we are being told by government that we don't have enough. And so if we sell critical state assets like this, and we allow a few people to pocket the money, and the media, which is the fourth estate of the realm, is quiet, civil society organizations are quiet, because we've been overwhelmed by the sheer number of corruption scandals we have witnessed under these people, then that is a problem. And that is why we are raising this issue. It is our hope that you will help us pursue it to its logical conclusion. But ladies and gentlemen of the press, the day of accountability for corrupt officials of the Akufo-Addo government is not far. Ask the next NDC Mahama administration, inshallah, in 2021, shall investigate and prosecute all culprits who are involved in this stinking corruption scandal. Notice is hereby served to all those who continue to plunder the assets of state-owned entities like BOS, that the day of reckoning, the day of accountability, cometh sooner than later. Thank you very much for your attention.